Okay. Hi, Tamsin.
Hello, hello.
So I'll just say a few words about who you are. So this is Tamsin Hartley, and Tamsin's work was introduced to me through a buddy of mine, Clint Matheny, who's a NLP practitioner and Ericksonian work, and he was just sharing how much he liked Tamsin's work and recommended her book, which I got. Her book is called The Listening Space. And Tamsin does this amazing work that I think grew out of initially the work of David Grove in clean language. But it's really, a couple of things strike me about the work. And I've taken 2 classes with Tamsin now, which I highly recommend, and I'll mention those. But, in a way, you bring, your work has brought so much clarity in navigating the clean language work, at least for me,
Thank you.
The clean language work, which is incredibly powerful, and we'll dig into what it is in a moment. It can be a little free form in a way. And so I think Tamsin, kind of zeroed in on a particular structure that's very, it's easy to navigate and get a sense of. And it's something that you can use with coaching clients, and I found it can be sort of a self-guided approach as well. And before I stop talking, and then we'll have this be more of a dialogue. So Tamsin has 2 classes, one called The Listening Space on that process, and another class called Coming to Calm. And so we're going to chat for a bit, and then we'll have a guided experience also. So thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's a real privilege. I'm looking forward to this.
Great. So I thought the place we would start is around, if you could just say a little bit about, this is the listening space, or, what is it a little bit? I can describe it, but I'd rather hear from you kind of how you think about it and put it into a context of other work.
So the listening space is a structured process that involves using a specific set of questions, clean questions, in a specific order, but it brings the principles of mindful exploration, mindful awareness. So it invites embodiment. It invites an awareness of what's happening in your body. These questions asked in this way, you could say that you're asking questions that your body can answer. So clean questions that were created by David Grove in the 1990s, and I've just taken a reduced set of them, 5 of the full repertoire of, well, he had 30 or so questions altogether, 12 basic questions, 20 specialized questions, 20 or so. And the listening space just uses 5 of those, plus a handful of others, or a few others. But bringing awareness to the self. Does that?
Great. Yeah,
does that explain
that's
it?
beautiful. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned you described it in that way, and I'm getting our typical siren on my block. So
that's New York for you.
Yeah, it's almost a guarantee. So a couple of things I'd like to underscore. So clean questions, what's meant by that is David Grove was very interested in questions and statements that allowed a person to have their own experience as opposed to directing their experience. So it might be something about a sensation as opposed to saying, oh, you're noticing nervousness. So in other words, he doesn't want to lead the client. So I just wanted to say that's my understanding of clean questions.
You're right in that you're trying not to. Well, actually, the clean element is the not contaminating with your own assumptions and suggestions.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, we can't help but influence and direct our client's attention, or you can use a listening space for a friend, or it's not necessarily just with a client. So it's not that you're not influencing
Right.
the direction of their attention, but the clean element is not contaminated. I mean, quite put simply, clean language is a specific set of questions used with the other person's words only.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the most commonly used question is anything else about, is there anything else about? So you might say, take a word that you've used, directing attention. Is there anything else about directing attention? So you wouldn't change it to, is there anything else about the way you're directing attention?
Right.
You literally take, is there anything, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you certainly wouldn't swap it out for your own words, right? So
you wouldn't swap it up for your own words.
So I think that's such a key principle in this work and your work, David Clo's work. And the other is that it is an embodied practice or process, that it brings you into your experience, which is so powerful. And in Tamsin's class, in particular, Coming to Calm, she really talks about the nervous system and the brain, and how this type of process can really calm us down. And oh, that's great.
Yes.
Yeah. And Tamsin has the best props, and she has icons, and this is one of my favorites. We'll come back to this, but
I was gonna say yes.
So I would say those are really key elements for me. And it's, you know, I really like that it can be a guided but sort of non-invasive experience.
Yes.
And it can be a self-guided also. So when besides the fact that this is kind of at the core of your work, when are moments when you might think, oh, this is when I would use this, or this is, you know, either with a client or for yourself? Or...
For myself, if I'm feeling a sense of, I don't know, emotional charge. Actually, for myself, I run a practice group every week, and I just find being listened to and having a listening space helps to settle me generally, or helps me think constructively around whatever issue I bring. You know, I don't even know before I sit down, and so in a listening space, it starts with the question, what would you like to explore? It's not outcome focused. It brings that principle of mindful awareness. So I don't know when I sit down what I might want to explore, but I know that at the end of that, however long it might be, 20 minutes, I've usually done my most constructive thinking, and it's my thinking. And I usually, do you want me to give an example?
Sure.
So, okay, so at the moment, my father is ill in hospital. And so having that listening space enabled me to connect with a really resourceful feeling. And, you know, ironically, the word that came up for me was joyful. And now when I think of that, I can feel that sort of warm glow around my heart that started off as an orange glow, but actually has become red now. And when I connect with that, it really helps me to settle. So it really, from a personal point of view, it can really settle and be constructive, be creative. So that's from my perspective. It's a lovely thing to be able to offer to somebody else. I'll offer it to a friend. If they, you know, if they seem to have something that was on their mind, if it's appropriate, I say, would you want a listening space? If it's a friend that wants to explore a creative idea, a lot of this way of asking questions, I experimented with a composer friend, and we just experimented with using questions in this non-outcome focused way. So for his composition, but within a client, so I work as a client. Sorry, I don't. I work as a coach. I use it a lot in my coaching. Now, it might be that I hold a listening space. What would you like to explore? And the whole session becomes one long listening space with lots of repeating back of what the other person said, and just asking that very structured set of questions. That could take an hour. Or it might be that I hear within a coaching session that somebody uses a word repeatedly, or that seems to have a lot of charge, or seems to be seems to be getting in the way, perhaps. And so I'll give an example, because I have one here from a client session. But if I hear one of those words, I might just say, oh, okay, you've mentioned this. So in this instance, it was the client was talking about losing it in meetings. So she worked as a residential unit manager. And she talked about, sometimes when I'm in a meeting with the psychologist or the psychiatrist, she said, I just boil, I lose it. She said, and then I've lost it for the rest of the day. I can't concentrate anymore. And she's talking really fast. And I just boil. So I'm thinking boil. That sounds like it's something that's not particularly useful for her. She's repeated it a lot. And all I said was, boil. Would you like to explore that in a little bit more depth? And that's all I did. But
so that's kind of the entry. Yeah. The
entry. Some people explain what a listening space is. I just go straight. We've already got a contract to work together. I don't give too much explanation. Keep it light touch. And so it may be that specific set of questions, which we're going to have a go with, that specific set of questions, that actually for her. So I said, boil. Yeah, what kind of boil? Well, it starts here, it starts in my belly, and it's like, I just feel like I'm exploding here. Anything else about boil? And exploding here. She said, well, it feels like I get to a certain point and I can't stop it. Whereabouts is boil? So I'd repeat back some words, all the way. And she said, well, it's in my belly. It's like lava here, right up. And very, very quick. Is boil on the inside or the outside? It's definitely on the inside. Does boil have a size or a shape? It comes up just up my spine. And I asked her to represent that on paper. Like those questions, quick, speaking quickly, took her probably 3 minutes. And I always invite people to give them colours and just to represent on paper in some way. And that drawing, it becomes part of the process. And she got a black pen and she got a red pen, and she drew this very quickly. That's the lava coming up her spine. That's the boil in her head. And so for her, that was her experience of boil. Very vivid for her, a metaphor, which is one of the really powerful things about these questions, is that they can be asked in a way that invite metaphor. Metaphors don't always appear.
Right.
When they do, you have a very different way of bringing awareness to your experience, much more tangible for her. So that was boil. And I asked her, okay, this was a coaching session. So I said to her, okay, so if that's boil, there are a few finishing questions. What do you know now about boil? Anything else? And what difference does knowing that make? I then said, okay, so what would work better instead when boil happens? She's the problem with boil is not only is it unpleasant for her, but it means that she's not advocating well for her residents. So she said, well, I need to put a lid on it. You have another focus word, putting a lid on it, which became a lid here.
Okay.
And she then has a different way of coming to know her.
Of orienting it, yeah.
Orienting it. And the impact of that for her, you continue that principle of mindful awareness. I said to her, okay, now you know about boil, that's great. If it happens again, great. Just notice it, notice all the qualities of it, notice how it starts, become really familiar with it. Notice all the stages of it. Don't try and force it to stop. Don't try and suppress it. Just notice if it happens again. And you may even find that this image changes over time. And the interesting thing was that because she now has a different way of bringing awareness to experience, actually, boil hadn't happened in the 3 or 4 months after this. It hadn't happened again, because she had a different way of knowing how it was building up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That's some of what I love in this process. You know, I put this in a category of work that if something's coming up that's really disturbing for me, or really, you know, especially intense feeling things, this is a great process. And the other thing I love about it is I don't need to know how I'm going to change it going into this
Yes.
process. And
Yes.
and I will say one thing, one distinction that I think about with this, it's not outcome focused.
No.
However, it almost invariably gets a rich result. So I think a lot of times when people hear it's not outcome focused, they confuse that with thinking that it isn't a rich and gratifying experience. And I don't think I've ever done a listening space or coming to calm without some rich result. And sometimes a very, very powerful change. So it, even though it isn't outcome focused, it can be used when people are stuck and want a different result or want more choice.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So let's talk about this for a minute, because I just love.
I've got a bigger one than that.
Really? Oh my God. So,
that's my welcome mat.
Yeah. So Tamsin uses different metaphors and symbols to sort of mark out different stages or different aspects of the work. And the welcome mat in particular is very, very useful, not just in this process. So just as an example of a little nugget of your work, how do you think about the welcome mat?
I actually think the welcome mat is probably the most important feature of this whole process, of this whole way of using these questions. And the metaphor for me is about when you go into a space of listening to someone in this way, you need first to wipe your feet on the welcome mat. And in so doing, you're wiping away any desire to fix, to change, to analyze, to interpret. You're welcoming all thoughts and emotions, the good, the bad, the ugly, in equal measure. And all of that's really important. You're not favoring the comfortable, the joyful, the creative over the uncomfortable. You just welcome it all as information. And I think that's, and it's really helpful. I mean, I think that's quite a useful metaphor to share with clients as well. It's really helpful if your clients or the person you're holding a listening space for can do the same. And one of the things that I say is, this is a space about exploring what's on your mind rather than having to come up with solutions. And people talk about how that seems to take the pressure off.
Yes, I think it takes the pressure off the client, and it takes the pressure off the coach, because both with this and I would say the Ericksonian work, for me, there was a certain point where I realized, wow, this process really works. And I don't need to make it work. So it let the pressure off this need of like, oh, I've got to do a great session, or I have to get a result for someone. And I think because that settles me down, it also settles down whoever I'm talking to. And very often, if they let go of it, it can allow solutions to come.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So
nice.
So that can be really, really powerful.
And you bring a different kind of presence, I think, as the coach.
Yeah. I just noticed all the tension goes out of my body when I.
Yes.
It's like, oh yeah, the welcome mat.
I often talk about the drama triangle. Just have a look at where it is.
I have one. I happen to have one right here.
Another prop, another visual. Yes.
Oh no, I only have two of it. Where's the third? Do you have it?
So I don't know which ones you've got there, but I think particularly Rescuer is if you know Stephen Cartman's drama triangle, I love it for its simplicity, but Rescuer is, as a listener, is the trap we tend to fall in, wanting to make better. And it's actually really uncomfortable Brilliant. Yes. So victim, persecutor, rescuer.
Yeah.
It can feel uncomfortable when you're listening to someone and they're in distress or they're experiencing difficulty. And so it can trigger our own discomfort. So rescuer, I think, is a listener, and wiping your feet on that welcome mat helps to wipe away. You can set that to one side. But I think also actually as the explorer, so facilitator, explorer, I mean, one of the biggest traps is that we go into
judgment,
persecuting ourselves, giving ourselves a hard time. And so actually, I think particularly rescuer for the listener and perhaps persecutor for the explorer, it helps to just settle those things.
Great. Well, shall we jump into an experience?
Oh, go on. Yes, let's.
I mean, we're already having an experience, but a more focused experience. All right, so Tamsin is going to guide us all. I'm just going to go into it, so I won't be attentive in that moment.
Yeah. So, Rob, you suggested it might be nice to explore calm and perhaps what calm means for us. Before we do so, I'm just going to suggest that if you're watching this, if you have, it would be helpful if you have a piece of paper, some paper, a pen, and if you have coloured pens to hand, that's even better. But no worries if you don't. But it might be nice to get those to hand beside you.
Just check the one
because we'll need them during this. And then I'll explain what this is all about.
Okay, well, I'm going to go with.
Don't worry, a pen.
Yeah.
Or, so, and Rob, you might want to put yourself on mute. I don't know. So I'm going to give you an instruction, followed by a set of questions, and I'd like you to all wipe your feet on that welcome mat. You're not trying to get anywhere with this. You're not trying to achieve anything other than noticing what arises for you in response to the questions. And after each question, I'm going to pause for a period of time and invite you just to notice where your attention goes. So wipe your feet on the welcome mat, and we're going to bring our attention to what calm means for you. And settle yourself into a comfortable position. You might want to close your eyes or just soften your gaze, whichever works best for you. And thinking about calm and what that means for you. What kind of calm is that calm? And is there anything else about calm? And whereabouts is calm? Is calm on the inside or the outside? And does calm have a size or a shape? And does calm have a sound? And is there anything else about calm? And gradually bring your awareness back to the room around you. And I'm going to invite you to represent on paper in some way what arose for you when you explored calm. And it might be an image, and it might be some words. And you might want to ask yourself, what am I noticing as I look at what I'm drawing or writing? And is there anything else about what I'm noticing as I look at what I've drawn or written? And you might want to ask yourself, what do I know now about calm? And what difference does knowing that make? And that'd be an okay place to leave it.
It would. Thank you. Thank you.
Anything you'd want to share of that experience, Rob?
Well, I think I'm often struck by how deep that can get, right? And relatively quickly. I don't know how much time we spent. Be interesting to look. I started connecting with different times and places where I experienced calm, and I sort of settled on one, and was sort of there for a bit, and then it was nice to kind of connect it with the body and the somatic, which for me deepened it. And then sort of when we were coming back, it occurred to me that I'm as we're recording this, I'm in the middle of quite a busy day.
Yeah.
And sort of the hustle and bustle of a day, and how I, so the contrast of that experience to my typical momentum in my day really struck me. And so kind of the aha for me is, oh, it might be nice to build more of this into my day, or into my, even though I'm somebody who does take time out for these things, why not more? So
yeah, nice. Nice.
So that's great. And so that process, it's really kind of the combination of both of your classes in a way, right? It's a bit of the listening space and a bit of the coming to calm class.
Yes, and I suppose the questions are all listening space questions, and the questions in the listening space, clean questions. 5 of those questions are clean questions, strictly speaking. The clean questions that particularly invite you to connect with your somatic experience, or are, I think, whereabouts is. Is it on the inside or the outside? Does it have a size or a shape? Calm. So those questions are inviting a kind of thingness, if you like, to the experience that we don't always do. A metaphor, something that is a bit more tangible. And actually, the added question, does it have a sound? That's not one of David Grove's questions, but was added by a musician friend of mine. It seems to generate more information, but it's so in the listening space, we're just primarily using clean questions. In coming to calm, as we take the different elements of our experience, it's about separating that out. So I use, again, more visuals. These different elements, these different aspects, what you see, what you hear. We don't do what you're feeling in your body. I mean, obviously, you could do, if you're doing 5 senses, you could do smell, right, and taste, but it's sort of less relevant to the. You could do, but we just stick to bodily sensations, right. Thought, and emotions. So
yeah. So it's a way of another way. I mean, one of the ways I think of it is, I do a similar thing that I just call taking an inventory of experience. It's, you're kind of making note of things, and as you said, it's mindful awareness, right? You're bringing awareness to things that are in your experience, but you may not be noticing or paying attention to. So
yes, and absolutely. And also, you may just have an experience that everything seems to be sort of knotted together in one go. I mean, particularly if you're well, there's 2 things. You can use this. It's really nice to use this for, you ask questions of each aspect of your experience for grateful awareness, because how often do you really stand and think, oh, okay, let me just take that moment in time and really unpick in every way, what I was feeling, what I was feeling in my body. So it's almost like you're milking the experience.
Yeah, you're deepening. You're deepening your experience of something. So that's, and I do want to point out in both classes that, today we did this example of calm, which happens to match the name of that class. But this can be done with any experience. It can be done with a powerful resource, like something that, that you really connect with. It could be joy, it could, whatever it is. And it can be done as an exploration of a stuck place. So.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. And whether you're using the listening space questions that we've just used for calm, or whether you're actually, what I tend to do is get people to literally get up out of their chair, lay these on the floor, and then you can go and
move
stand
through
in different places, so that you're actually, and most importantly, the separation really is from here, which is the, if you like, the evidence. This is the thing that actually happened. And these become how you are experiencing that situation.
Yes.
And I think what happens is we particularly with difficult situations, when we've experienced difficulties, that all kind of gets mashed up in one.
Yes. Yes.
And when you're able to really come to the body and notice what's happening in terms of bodily sensations, and particularly here, allow all those thoughts, those difficult thoughts, a safe space of expression.
Yeah.
There's something very settling about doing that.
Yeah. And you're reminding me, one of the things that I love about this process or these processes and processes like this is that you're bringing a different state or response to something that typically you might recoil from, or typically sends you into an unresourceful state, to then have an experience of that, a grounded experience.
Yes.
It's almost like you can't help but experience some shift. It's like something, you were terrified and, to look in the closet, and all of a sudden it's like, well, what if I was calm, and what if I slowed it down? And what if I took things one thing at a time? And
yes.
things shift. It's really, really cool.
And I think there's a lot of
coming back to your brain, it's like
coming back to my brain. I was going to say there's a lot about shame there. So often we experience fear because we feel shame in some way, and shame is an illness of the dark. When we shine light on it, when we feel when we get a threat response is triggered, actually just having a chance to let it be, to download it. I call it drama dumping, in all its glory, because we all do it. It's normal. It's part of being human, and it's like it's a way of normalizing it, and letting it lose its hold on us somehow.
This was this was one of the drawings from one of the classes. I can't remember what we were exploring, but I definitely was experiencing a stuckness, and I think it was something around chaos.
Yes. It looks like it could have been.
Yeah. So, and there's something also to I like the drawing aspect, because there's something to externalizing it a little bit and being able to look at it from the outside. So
yes,
it's a very rich process.
And I think that with a listening space, and if you have both externalized, but particularly if you get a metaphor, metaphors I think are deeply personal and powerful. I absolutely, I remember having an experience where someone started to, after a clean language facilitation, before I created the listening space, and she started to analyze my metaphor after practice, and I thought, no, that it felt almost violating. I thought, that is personally mine, and it's not for you. It was a very interesting, very visceral experience that I had. Absolutely, they're not for interpretation or analysis or comment on by others. They are yours.
And I want to call something out, because there are a lot of ways of working with metaphor, and so but to contrast it so that people can experiment. So first of all, in this case, the metaphor is coming from the person. So the coach isn't saying, well, it sounds like a box of marbles, so certainly we're not imposing our metaphor.
Absolutely.
And there are also ways of working where if somebody says, oh, it's a tangle, the coach might say, well, what if we take one thread at a time? And they start to move the metaphor or interact with the metaphor. And sometimes that will work. And sometimes, or they might say, well, what if you turn it into a carpet? And again, they're offering a shift in one way. Can be great and powerful work, but what's so nice about this is you're letting all those choices happen with the client. So
you'll never get, there's something, honestly, it feels quite magical often, because you as a facilitator, you think, I have no idea where this is going. That's okay. I've wiped my feet on the welcome mat, and it can actually almost feel a bit scary. Sometimes it doesn't anymore, but but there's something magical about how a metaphor, when you really, when someone is really able to be with that experience, how it starts to change of its own accord. And you think, oh my goodness, that is fascinating and, you know, almost magical.
Yeah. So
it becomes a perfect fit for that person.
Yeah. And as a coach, getting used to not trying to change the metaphor or shift it, or, you know, oh, you know, pressure makes a diamond, you know, getting used to not doing that is very similar to, you know, in most people's coach training, learning how to not offer suggestions and instead ask questions. So it's a similar thing. You're really stepping back a little bit and trying to let the work take place with whoever you're talking to. So
and then the magic begins. Always less is more. It means you actually don't have to do a lot as a coach, other than just think, well, enjoy the journey,
the
really,
rich,
or whatever.
The rich journey. And I think that's the last thing I'll say, is that it's a nice process to facilitate. It's a nice experience as a coach. And it's a safe way of helping people explore sometimes some pretty tough domains. So so all right, why don't we, is that an okay place to leave it?
Lovely. Thank you so much for inviting me along. It's been really fun. Thank you.
Great. And so people know, I will put links to Tamsin's book and her website, and you can take courses there if you like. I highly recommend them. This isn't a plug, but I really adore them. So I encourage you to look into that, and obviously any links you want me to put there. So, well, thank you so much, Tamsin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers.